Okay, solving equations. We want to basically undo these calculations and solve for x. Now, before we can undo things, we really need to know exactly how many things we're dealing with here. So one good idea is to get rid of these brackets first. Okay, so I'm going to distribute here and get rid of those brackets. And I can see that I have 6 x's and I'm taking away 8 ones. I'm taking away 7 more ones. And on this side I have 2 x's plus 18. Okay, so at this point we want to maybe start combining like terms and then start undoing some of these calculations. So I'm going to combine like terms first. So it becomes minus 15. And I'm going to undo this plus 2x. And that gives the x's on one side. I'm going to undo this plus minus 15 with a plus 15. In doing so, I get 4x on this side. I end up with this equals 33 on this side. Divide both sides by 4, so I'm going to undo that times 4. And I end up with x equals 33 over 4, which is about 8 1/4. Now I prefer you leave it like that because the improper fractions are better than mixed numbers because they're much easier to deal with mathematically. Fractions and equations. Okay, we probably want to get rid of the divide by 4 with a times by 4. So that divide 4 and times 4 undo each other, and all we're left with is x. I have to make sure I times that 4 to everything in the equation, so it's got to times that 3x. So I'm going to subtract 12x's, and that times 4 divide 4 cancel out. So I end up with negative 11x equals 7. How do I undo a times negative 11? I divide by negative 11, and I end up with negative 7 over 11. Okay, so there's my final answer, and I can check it by substituting it back in. Now this is going to look kind of awkward when we substitute back in, but it will work. Okay, so inequalities. So how do I solve for inequalities? Well, I can solve for inequalities just the same way. It works just like equations. We just have to remember that if we ever times or divide the equation by negative, both sides by negative, we end up having to flip the inequality. That's the only difference between inequalities and equations. Otherwise, everything works the same. So I have a positive x I want to get rid of, negative x I want to get rid of with a plus x. I have a minus 8 that I want to get rid of with a plus 8. So here I end up with 3x's is less than 10. Divide both sides by 3. I end up with x is less than 10 over 3, which is 3.3 repeating. Now, notice that if I put the negative, if the x's on the other side, I would end up with negative x's. Okay, so I could have done this, minus 2x, minus 2x, minus 2, minus 2, and I end up with negative 10 less than negative 3x. Now to solve this, I would have to divide by negative 3. I'm going to do this in a different color. So if I divide by negative 3, okay, that makes sense. The problem is, if I just leave it like that, I get x is greater than positive 10 over 3. But here it says x is less than, and this one is correct. What ends up happening is, if I divide by a negative, what has to happen is that sign has to flip around. It's got to go from less than to greater than. Okay, so this sign has to flip around and it will give us the correct answer. So if I divide or multiply both sides by negative, I have to remember to flip the inequality. That's the only difference between equations and inequalities.